Today's episode of In the Trenches is brought to you by System 12 Guitar Method. Sign up today at ryanroxie.com.
In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.
Hello, and welcome to another live stream episode of In the Trenches. How do you know it's live stream? Well, you can see we are in our mobile studio, a.k.a/hotel room, a.k.a. wherever we can get some sort of Wi-Fi to do our show In the Trenches. Folks, how are you doing out there? And if you are not seeing all this beauty, the reason why you're not is because you're listening to us on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you very much for doing that. But we'd really like you to go to our YouTube official channel. You know the drill. Go over to Ryan Roxie Official on the YouTube and hit that subscribe button that Vic, our producer right now, is putting up on the screen. And you'll get to listen and to watch and to be part of all these In the Trenches episodes, because we do have a live chat. And today is a good one. All right. We've been on the road now for a few weeks with Ace Frehley. I've been talking about it. We've been, somehow we've been able to continue the schedule of the podcast, and it hasn't been easy. There's been some challenges. We've had to work around the golf schedule, obviously, work around the actual tour schedule. Sometimes I think the tour schedule revolves around the golf schedule, but but the podcast schedule, we got it. We're live right now. And I have one of our touring members with us today. You know how we like to have living legends in the trenches on the show. Usually they are the legends that are on stage. But tonight, and if you are in Europe, because we have a special nighttime show, tonight we have a legend that's made his living in front of the stage, mixing the sound for some of the world's biggest bands. Currently, he's on tour with us in Alice Cooper. He's running front of house for Ace Frehley. And would you please welcome into the trenches a friend of mine from New York.
He's on tour with us in Alice Cooper. He's running front of house.
There you go. We have a little bit of echo and stuff like that. That's fine. That's him mixing sound. That's what he's doing. He's mixing sound right now. So welcome to Into the Trenches, sound technician extraordinaire, legend, Nite Bob. Hello, Nite Bob.
Right now.
Can you hear me all right? There you go. Already. Right out of the gate. Sound problems.
Yeah. I got delay.
All right. So how about putting in some earphones if you have to?
I put the headphones in, it was still echoing.
You know what it is? I think I know exactly what it is. You might have another tab open. You might have another tab open that has the live stream episode. So close that other tab that has the YouTube channel in it. Because if you have that going, then you're going to get that delay. All right. No. This is awesome. This is what I love about live stream. This is what I love about our podcast. You know? Is everything can happen? Anything can happen. Can you hear me now? Let's get him unmuted. Oh, it's not you. Okay, I have to unmute him. Okay. So, Nite Bob, unmute your microphone on there. Should be a little microphone by your speaker, by your little thing. Yeah. If not, hey, buddy.
I'm
Should be a little microphone by your speaker. By your little thing.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine. I honestly think you might have another tab on that has YouTube channel on it, and you need to close that channel.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
You know?
I can hear you fine. I honestly think you might have another tab on that has YouTube channel on it, and you need to
Close all your other tabs right now. Close all your other tabs, and then we're going to get this podcast started.
tab on
By
that
golly. That's what we do when we have a special time.
Oh, that was brain frying.
Don't worry, you got it. See, no more echo.
Yeah.
And all you did, all you had is the old YouTube on, and you were listening to it on a delay. But you're used to putting lots of delay on the vocals, I'm sure. You all good now?
Yes, I'm fine.
What's happening, Nite Bob? Nice to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. I'm sitting in St. Louis, just like you.
That's right.
In a hotel room, while some of my band crew are actually taking showers in the shower there. Maybe we'll get one.
That is what they call, folks, the day room. We get one of those day rooms. We're very lucky with the Alice Cooper tour that we get our own day rooms for us to just chill and mellow out. But it's never a room where you can actually spend the night in. This is when you're doing the band tour and you're living on the tour bus. That room is basically for showers and other business, I guess.
We'll leave at 4 a.m. to go to wherever we're going next.
How long have you been doing this, man? How long have you actually been doing
this? Over 50
life?
years.
50 years.
Over 50. If you count the times that I played in bands in high school and stuff like that, where actually in the beginning I made more money playing in a band than most bands. Yeah. I didn't really look like that in high school, but that's a funny picture. That's Aerosmith era.
You've maintained sort of the same hairstyle all these years.
Yes, and the same all black clothing as well. For decades.
It's been your trademark. Now, did that haircut come from? I see a little bit of the Beatles.
My hair like this, actually.
Huh?
I could tell you the person who cut my hair like this.
Who was it?
Her name was Susan Rothschild, right? She was an English model. I met her when I was living in Los Angeles, and she is on the cover of the first Flying Burrito Brothers record.
Get out of here. Vic, do you have a picture of that right now? I thought you'd have one up. No, he doesn't. Dan, see, those are the types of things that we need to spring on Vic, maybe before we press record, but it's fine. He'll find it. That's good. So,
Gilded Palace of Sin is the name of the record.
I like it. I what I see in your haircut, and honestly, folks, if you're not watching us on the YouTube official channel, then you won't be able to see Nite Bob's lovely locks. I see a little bit of the Beatles. I see a little bit of Ramones. And a little bit of Patti Smith.
Well, here's the deal. To be honest about it, it all predates. It's all like from the New York Dolls era in the early 70s. Okay. And everybody had really long hair in New York.
And a little Dennis Dunaway, to be honest with you.
As did Alice Cooper's band, who was living up in Connecticut, and they were in Max's Kansas City all the time. If you look at the backline guys for the New York Dolls when I worked for them, everybody had long straight hair except the drum roadie, who had curly hair, and his name was Max. And he was a very interesting character. He passed away about a couple of years ago, but the rest of us is still around, and we get together once a month actually to have some laughs at the there's only one New York Doll left at this point.
Who is the surviving New York Doll?
David Johansen.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as the original Dolls, I mean, those, you can see me behind the bass amp, and that's Pete Jordan playing bass instead of Arthur.
Well, we just had Steve Conti on a few weeks ago, and I'm sure you've played and worked with him over the years and many different types.
Steve a long time.
There you go. There's a ITT favorite, Steve Conti, hanging with Nite Bob, sound technician. It seems as though it all started around New York, because New York has been your base. You are Mr. New York. Did it start with music, you playing it, and you kind of alluded to it in just a couple minutes ago that you were playing guitar?
Right.
Where did that transition go to, like, you know what, I'm going to start I'm going to go in front of the stage and start mixing it? Okay,
I'm going to do this in a really quick method, right? Here's the deal, right? Both my parents were in the electronics industry, right?
My mom took pictures, right?
My mom took pictures, but she was also a line manager at RCA making tubes, right? My father did missile guidance systems, right? So I come from a kind of scientific background,
technical background.
And but they love music. Neither one of them played an instrument. They insisted that my sister and I take up an instrument for a year, blah, blah, blah. I picked guitar, right? So
smart man.
Yeah, I thought, well, my dad wanted me to play saxophone. And I told him, I said, I don't know, man. He goes, those guys don't really look very happy when they play, while the guitar player is always smiley happy, So I think I'll go with that. Yeah, that's a I don't have that guitar anymore, but I still have the amp.
Really?
So here's the deal. Back in that part of the 60s, everybody had a band, you know. So it's like I got together, I formed a band with some kids in the neighborhood, right? And we would play pool parties, right? And when we got into high school, the deal was to play these high school dances, right? So you'd learn a bunch of covers, and we played mostly Catholic high schools, right? So the deal was if you could keep those kids dancing so they weren't off in the corners making out, right? The nuns and the priests would have you come back time and time again, you know, because it made their job easier, right? And what they would do is they charge $1, maybe $2 to get in. And some of these basketball places that we played, you could fit 200, 300, 400 kids in there, and they just give the money to the band. So there were times that we would go out, we'd play all these covers, and I would, you know, we'd make like $400 a night. Friday and Saturday, that's $800 split between 5 guys. That was more money than my father was making working on the missile guidance system. So
he was working on the lunar modules.
On the lunar module, right? So it was like, well, okay. And I said, like me, goes, maybe this music thing is not so bad. So he also helped me build my first PA, right? I had a kid I went to high school with. His name was Tom Pabianski, who was an electronics whiz, right? Between him, me, and my dad, we built a really killer PA. We got some Macintosh amps from where my you know, this it's a secret company called Kierfot that does all this electronic stuff. They were going solid state, and they were dumping all these tube amps out. My old man said, get the car, drive behind, tell Willie at the gate you're coming to pick me up. Go to this dumpster and get as many of these amps as you can and put them in the trunk of your car. Right, so I had a really loud PA, right, and I started renting. When we weren't playing, I would rent it out to other bands, right? I rented it out to this band called Black Forest Roads, right, which was they were into like original music and stuff like that, right? They weren't making any money, but they still hired the PA. Well, this guy Harry Popick that worked for Black Forest Roads, at one point he says to me, he goes, I can get you a job in New York City running a rehearsal studio. And when it's not booked, your band can rehearse there. And I guarantee you'll meet lots of interesting people. So I took the job, right? My first day on the job, I dealt with Mahavishnu Orchestra. That's the place. Man, you guys are like digging deep into my place.
Hey, man, when we get into an artist,
looking at them, brilliant.
Our producer Rick goes down the rabbit hole. Federico works the script. I just sit here and grow my mustache and try to, you know. No, this in this area of where this studio was. This is what basically Soho became. Right.
It was just an industrial area. It was on the corner of Grand and Worcester.
Oh my! Now you can't even afford to look there. You can't even afford to walk there.
Those 2 floors are now like $4 million condos. Right. So my first day on the job, I had the New York Dolls in one studio, and I had Mahavishnu Orchestra in the other one. Right, kind of two extremes, really.
Different types of stuff.
And boy, oh boy, it was instant realization that I thought I was a good guitar player till that first day at work. Right, when you're standing next to John McLaughlin and going like, I would never be able to play like this. Right, then like you'd go to the other studio and the Dolls would be playing Personality Crisis, and I'd be going like, I don't think I could generate this kind of energy either. You know,
so you probably could play the chords. I mean, obviously Johnny Thunder's a huge influence. You know, for me, I got to jam with him one time at the Loft in New York. You remember the Loft? You probably have been there once, twice, 300 times there. But rumor has it, with a quick New York Dolls antidote. Did I say that right? Antidote? No, I'm not saying it right. My victory. Antidote. It's not an antidote. I know that. It's an antidote, I think. I'm going to Anecdote. There you go.
I went to college.
To the rescue. You were there when Johnny Thunders bought his TV yellow Les Paul Jr., or you happened to be around there?
I had a role in it. Here's the deal, right? They played this gig in Memphis, and Johnny at that point had a Les Paul TV special with 2 P90s, right? And when Johnny was in the spirit of things, right? When he was, a switch and 4 controls was a little too much for him. Because you play guitar, if you happen to turn off that neck pickup, right, and then flip the switch to the middle or to the neck position, your guitar goes out.
I do it on a nightly basis. And
Johnny did that in front of a screaming crowd. He just spun around, took the guitar, and smashed it. Right back then, that guitar would cost probably about $300. Right, so it was quite a move. The kids went wild. Right, they rioted. The cops arrested David Johansen for inciting a riot, and they took him off to the Pokey in Memphis, and he said, "Would you do the Elvis? Do this to Elvis?" And the cop said, "We would love to do this to Elvis." But to get back to the story, when we get back to New York, Pete Jordan, who is the New York Dolls head, stage manager, we'll call him, right? He said, "We got to do something about this guitar thing, right?" And I said, "Well, here's the deal. Go up and see Mr. Friedman up at We Buy Guitars and get him a Les Paul Jr., TV Jr., right? Same color.
On 48th Street, where all the guitar shops back in the day. I mean, is it still like that, 48th Street? Do they
No,
still
it's gone. In fact, it's been leveled. The buildings are all gone. The whole thing is gone. Last time I went there, it was just empty lots.
But so 48th Street's a place where you get all the guitars. So you send them up there.
Bought their stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And
send Johnny up there.
I said, "Well, we never sent Johnny anywhere." Right?
I guess not,
I said, "Pete, go up there and talk to Mr. Friedman, Larry Friedman, and say, tell him I sent you and tell him you need a TV Junior, right?" So Larry hooked him up and gave, I think he paid $275. And I said, "Make sure you get a brown case."
Why a brown case?
Because brown case, those guitars came in cardboard cases, like this alligator cardboard thing, cheap. And the brown case is what they use for the Sunburst Les Paul. It's a hard shell case.
Okay, so it's a little bit more protective.
Because when he had his junior, when he had the special, it was in a black, like 70s Les Paul case. I said, "Make sure you get a brown case." And back then, that brown case would add like $25 to the cost of the guitar. So that had one pickup and a volume and tone control, and everything was swell. I put a set of Grover pegs on it.
It's Johnny proof.
It was Johnny proof for decades.
And so you had a hand in that, because obviously the reason why I play the TV yellow Les Paul Jr. that I do, actually play a Billy Armstrong model, double cutaway, but it was relicked by our friends at Rock and Roll Relics. But I wanted that vibe. I wanted that vibe. Billy Rowe, exactly. I wanted that vibe of the New York Dolls, and here you are, going back to that rehearsal studio that you're working. You have the New York Dolls in the studio. How long was it before you started working for them, or was it years later?
It was a bit of time, because at one point they needed someone who was a better engineer than the cat who they were using now, right? Because it was starting, you had to be competitive against all these English. But I learned that on their first trip to England, right?
When was your first trip to England?
Oh, my first trip? I went in the 60s. I used to go over and buy Marshall amps over there for like $100 a pop and bring them back over here and sell them for $300.
Yeah, it's a nice racket. Wait a second. Now, when was your first trip over to the UK as a sound technician, and who was the band that you ended up
that was probably as a sound engineer, probably Aerosmith in '76.
Okay. But before that, you were going back and forth. You're partly responsible for breaking Marshall amps into the United States.
I wouldn't say that at all. No, Marshall was doing a very good job breaking their amps over there. I just found that we used to read Melody Maker. In the back, it would have all these music shops who are all on Denmark Street, right? And they'd list their prices in pounds. And we started looking at the conversion factor. We're going like, there's a high watt top for like $100. How much does it cost to go over there? And we go like, you could round trip to London for like $180 back then, because the dollar was really strong. Right. And so we go over, we go down there, buy a bunch of stuff. They used to see us. We go there like once a month and see how many amps we could buy, and then check them as excess baggage, and then take them back here and sell them to people.
It's like arbitrage.
Everybody thought like the English Marshall sounded better than the American Marshall, which is a fallacy, by the way. Sorry, old guys who paid extra dope to me, but that's the way it was.
Okay, I've always wanted to dispel that rumor, because that is another thing about Nite Bob, is not just doing the sound technician. A lot of people look to you as sort of the equipment guru.
Right.
And
that comes from my father. Like his thing was like, do the research. He goes, whatever you're interested in, do the research. Don't be afraid to call the company up or write them a letter or something like that, And
this is before YouTube, so you're actually reading the manuals front to back.
Well, they didn't have any manuals, which you could always call somebody up and talk to somebody in customer service or something like that. And I started doing that really early on, because like Marshall, USA was basically out in Long Island. Ampeg was it was a 15-minute ride from my house. You could go down there and talk to people there and say, why does this do this or this or that or the other? Why? And you get questions. That's how I first met a lot of amp guys, But so I knew a lot about amps.
Somehow you and your dad had come up with a super PA, because back in those days, were the only PAs when you were doing those dances that you were playing at, were those Shure column PAs, right? And what's your feeling on those?
Yeah, actually better than you would think. I've seen pictures of bands playing auditoriums using one of those mixers and maybe two columns aside.
Didn't the Beatles play Shea Stadium, or is that folklore with Shure PA?
I don't think they used Shure PA, but I know the last tour they did, sound was provided by Hanley Sound out of Boston area.
All right. So getting back to New York and staying in this sort of New York groove, if you will, you're currently on the road with Ace Frehley.
That's right.
Who plays, or played, and obviously legacy of a certain New York band it's quite big. Were you guys in the same circle back in those days as well, or how did it come that you're mixing Ace?
Okay, I guess it would have to be. I had that band with the makeup he's always talking about. Right?
We could say the K word, can't we? There they are.
Here's the deal. Here's the deal. I had run into Gene and Paul before there was Kiss, right? When they had their Wicked Lester band and all that, right? Because the scene was very small, right? Mm-hmm. If you went to Max's, you'd run into people, or somebody would, you'd be at some show at the Academy of Music or something like that. Oh, this is my friend Paul. He's from Queens. He's got a band, blah, blah, blah. It's like, so it was like a really small kind of thing. So I know people who audition. It's like when Bob Kulick auditioned for Kiss, right? And Binky Phillips auditioned for Kiss, right? When they had a loft on 14th Street. So, but what happens is that I was working a show for the Stooges on New Year's Eve in 1973 at the Academy of Music, right? The bill was Blue Oyster Cult, the Stooges, a hot local band called Teenage Lust, right? Okay. And then tacked on at the last minute was this band Kiss, right?
Were they Wicked Lester at that point, or did they?
No, they were Kiss. They were Kiss, and I had actually seen them play out in Queens at Coventry before, because the Dolls used to play Coventry, and like one of the Dolls bands said, "Oh, you guys should see this band Kiss. They're really funny." I don't think they'd like that very much. I said they were funny, but we went and they were a hoot. And these guys came and they played their little 20-minute set. Gene set his hair on fire, right? And we were kind of like, wow, look at this. It's like monster rock, whatever. And then 2 months later, they were a support band on the New York Dolls tour in the Midwest.
I just saw that Vic, our producer, put up the flyer for that.
That's right, Michigan.
And pretty soon, the roles flipped on that, and they obviously, were you hanging out with Ace back in those days? He's I equate him with New York just as much as I equate you with New York.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you. Here's a quick story up about that tour. Right, we were in Cleveland. We were all staying at this Holiday Inn, right, and there was a wild party going on, right? And these girls said to Arthur, the bass player in the Dolls, they go,
Arthur Kane.
Arthur Kane. He goes, they go like, you're not crazy. Deep Purple was crazier than you, right? And he went, oh, Deep Purple was crazy. And so he goes out in the hall and gets this fire extinguisher. And we're all like, oh no. What he does is he opens the window and throws the fire extinguisher out the window. We're on like the 10th floor, right? And of course we went and looked, right? And we saw this fire extinguisher go right down and through the roof of the restaurant, which was closed because this was like, 1 a.m. or something like that.
Right.
We go, this is going to be trouble. Right. So we went to the floor KISS was on, and we took their fire extinguisher and we put it on our floor. Right. Right. So the next day, right, we're checking out. We're going, let's get out of here. Right. And I saw their tour manager, negotiating with the front desk, like, just because our fire extinguisher was missing doesn't mean that we did that, but we're going like, let's get out of here.
There was some guilt by association on that because they had the reputation as well.
A thing called shifting the blame.
Yeah, passing the buck. I love it. So and if I remember Arthur, very quick contact that I had with him throughout the years, he's very quiet, understated guy.
Right.
But so if he was throwing out extinguishers out windows and then passing it on to KISS, I wonder what
the road guys decided we wanted to blame KISS.
Aha.
Artie was more, into entertaining the young ladies. Oh yeah, watch this. And we're like, oh.
Well, that's how you entertain people in Cleveland, Ohio.
This is the way it was back. This is the reality of touring in the early 70s. That it was like, there was no internet. There's no cable TV, right? There's no cell phones, right? You've got 1 or 2 magazines that feed you what's happening. I'm saying,
yeah.
Right? There's no TV shows.
No paper trail.
Nobody telling you this is what's happening here and blah, blah, blah. And like, if you heard like what, Rolling Stone, Cream Magazine, and Circus, something like that, right?
And you waited for those stories. You waited for that folklore.
And you lived for it, and of course those, a magazine's always like 3 months after an event happens. So by the time it gets to people out in the hinterlands, it's kind of like, then it gets telephoned around, and next thing it's like these things become, blown out of proportion. Like they're all saying like, how messed up the New York Dolls were on drugs and stuff. And that's not particularly true, because in order to be, it was hard to get drugs. It cost money to get drugs, right? And if you're not, they were on a tight leash from the management. They got like some living expenses, right? And they were able to, this is so funny, they could sign $15 a day to their hotel room. So you can't buy drugs and sign it to your hotel room. Nowadays you can, but back then you couldn't. Right? So they would depend.
I didn't know that. Do I have $15 in drug credit going on? If it is,
well, you can't. But now you could probably, Zelle a delivery service or whatever and have it come to your hotel.
There's an app for that. Yeah, there's probably an app for it.
But if you really look at what was going on culturally in like 74, 75, right? It was all about English bands, right? And American bands were more of a curiosity, like they were like the home team. Think about it. It was all like Rod Stewart and the Faces, the Who, the Stones, David Bowie, it was like, that's where your ticket money went. If you really think about it, right, it wasn't until like 76, like the American bands take over. You have the rise of KISS, the rise of Aerosmith, the rise of Boston, and in a way, the rise of Peter Frampton, who was basically an American band at that point, selling millions of records, right?
Well, the biggest record he made was from, recorded in the Bay Area, and that's where I grew up, and Frampton Comes Alive, one of my biggest influence of records.
It's like all of a sudden it's like the hometown team, it's like we don't need those limeys, we got our own bands, and those bands were willing to go out and work. I say that to both KISS and Aerosmith. They went out and did the work. They played all the time, and
Well, you're right there working with them as well.
Not in that period. That's embarrassing right there.
What period was that?
Oh, that's early. That's got to be like, I don't know, first album or something. Look at the clothes.
Yeah.
I didn't think much of them, Aerosmith, really. David sent me to see them play in a place called Banana Fish Garden in Brooklyn, and I was not impressed. The only thing that impressed me was Brad Whitford, because he looked like he was kind of dressed like Mick Taylor and played like Mick Taylor, right? I was like, that guy's really good. I don't know about that creepy singer, though.
That's funny. Had you garnished this reputation already as a sound guy? Was it the Dolls that did it, or what do you think was the band that sort of got you this reputation?
Here's the deal. Okay, this is the actual story, right? I did these shows with the Stooges at Max's Kansas City. Okay. Legendary.
For those of anybody keeping score at home, if you need to keep score at home, it's Iggy Pop and the Stooges, and this was like the original band. This is all the great.
That's actually from the show I did. That's a Max's Kansas City show, and the funny part is they hired a lot of gear. Right. And I was still working at the rehearsal place. Nobody wanted to do it, mainly because Max's where you played was on the second floor, and no one wanted to haul all this gear up this long flight of stairs. Right. So I said I'd do it because I liked the band. I figured it'd be kind of fun to hang out with the band. I at that point, I knew I could hire some muscle to bring the shit upstairs. Right. And get to see the band up close. Well, I got to see them way too up close. And, but those were revolutionary shows for me. I mean, as far as a band having firepower, like emotional and musical firepower, like like a tail spinning band on the way down, putting every ounce of their being into these shows, right, in New York City. So so we did these shows. There was, a couple of interesting incidents. You can read about it in Please Kill Me or whatever. And
that's one of the two of your books, right?
No, that's see that on his chest, that little black mark.
Yeah.
Well, he went to walk on some tables, and the table slipped, and he fell on top of some glasses, and he was bleeding like crazy, man. It was like being in Saving Private Ryan. I'd never seen anything like it. This guy's bleeding. I said, "You're going to stop, right?" He goes, "No, I'm a professional. I will finish my show." And our mutual pal, Alice Cooper, convinced him to go get stitched up because he just kept saying, "Put a piece of tape on it." I'm like, "Tape's not sticking to that. You're bleeding a lot."
So Alice was there that night as well.
Alice was there. Mm-hmm. And
I guess Andy Warhol was there as well.
Mm-hmm. It was it was quite a night, I must say. What happens is that like that's in August of 73. In October of 73, they called me up and they said, "We're doing a show in the Michigan Palace, and we need your help." So we're going to
that's a big gig at that point for you.
Yeah, right? That's a 3,000 seat hometown gig, 2 nights, right? And they say the tour manager says, "We need your help. These gigs are really important. There's a plane ticket in your name." And so I flew up to Detroit. I did these shows, right? When I came back from these shows were intense. That became that metallic KO. One side of the 2 record set is one of the shows I did, right? And when I came back, everybody treated me differently because a professional band had flown me to another city to do a show. Right. So they say, "Oh, this guy must know what he's doing,"
Yes.
So
it wasn't just because they always say, "Oh, we'll just use the house guy." You were flown in.
I was flown in. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that was the birth of the sort of rock star sound technician.
Wait, let's get not really. Here's the part that really seals the deal, right? That was like all of a sudden I wasn't the rehearsal guy anymore. Right, who played guitar. I was now the guy who knew everything, who also ran the rehearsal studio and played guitar. Right, that I mixed that show. That's the
later gig with Iggy.
That's the Ron Ashton a tribute in Ann Arbor, and that's Dennis Tech playing guitar.
That's great. Well, we go with a little bit
orchestra
chronological timeline here with photos.
That's right. Well, it's interesting because if you notice, there's like a 13-piece orchestra behind the band.
Yeah, exactly. That wasn't that they couldn't fit that into Max's Kansas City. I don't think.
No, not at all. And that was because Ron always thought that some of the music they made would make great film music, so they orchestrated some of it, and it's really good. Go find the DVD. The Ron Asheton tribute. It's got some interesting stuff on it. But the thing I came back. The Dolls said to me, they go, "Oh, you're the man. We want you to come and do Bibas in London. Right? Go get a passport." So I already have a passport. They were impressed. I already had a passport, right?
You figure you can probably grab a couple Marshall lamps on the way.
That's what I was thinking. I said, I know where the high watts are, and but what happened was there was some kind of, it's like, I don't know, someone in management stepped in and said, "Oh, we got this guy who works for the Stones or something like that. He'll mix them," right? It was a gig at a department store, Bibas, hip and trendy and all that kind of jazz, right? And so I didn't go, right? So I was like kind of bummed, right? And then some of my English pals, because a lot of English bands rehearsed at that studio. The studio was called Baggies, right? And
that was the one that was down in New York and Soho.
Right. That was down in what is now Soho, right? They came in and they called up and they said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I go like, "I was going to go to visit you guys in England, but it didn't happen." They go, "Well, we're here now. We're working for Emerson, Lake Palmer, and we could use a guy like you on this tour," right? So I went out and did 4 months of an arena tour in quadraphonic with Emerson, Lake Palmer.
Now see, this is the craziest thing, because quadraphonic is one of those quadraphonic sounds. You hear about it and you see it on Who records. I remember quadraphonic sound. That means sound coming from all ends of left, right, back, right. So was it true? Did it actually happen?
Yeah, it did. But there were, speakers in four corners of an arena.
And could you get something only coming from the back right?
Oh, yeah.
Something, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think they switched that? Why do you think they stopped doing that and only made it sort of a stereoscape?
Well, the thing was, it was incredibly complicated, and the technology wasn't really up to doing it. It was good for a special effect, right? Emerson, Lake Palmer had like you're trying to present music to people, right? If you start doing things like putting like kick and snare behind them, right? And my bands are still playing, it doesn't really work. I mean, like panning a synthesizer around the room is really exciting the first and second time you do it, and then it just gets to be annoying, It does, I mean, I get you. Go, pan the snare drum. And it was like, what? It's like, whatever, we didn't
like old Beatles records, but
pan everything to the left, put the band in the back. Like, okay.
So the thing that impresses me, Nite Bob, is because I know you.
Explain.
What'd you say? What is quadraphonic
I'm
sound?
seeing the thing on the bottom, quadraphonic sound.
Yeah.
4 speakers.
4 speakers, yeah.
4 speakers, one in each corner of the room. Front right, front left, rear right, rear left.
Sort of like a little bit like what you would have in your surround sound system these days when you know.
Now they got it all figured out, and people still don't do it in live.
They don't do it live.
Well, without getting too technical, there's this immersive sound thing that's going on now that works for some kind of acts, right? But loud rock, not really.
What kind of acts are doing immersive sound?
I forget. Bon Iver.
Okay.
And it works really good for electronica bands. Where you got bloops and bleeps coming from all different directions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's a trend anymore. It was like a big deal at one point, and now nobody talks about it.
Huh. Well, the thing that impresses me about you, Nite Bob, is that I know you primarily. I know you met you in New York City. You've mixed sound for me over at one of our mutual friend Don Hill's amazing club, amazing guy, Cat Club back in the day, rock and roll, just in the trenches. But here you are.
You guys are quick on the visuals.
That's a nice picture of Don Hill's, man. It's still there, but being unrented, apparently empty. What you said before. But the thing is, you actually cut your teeth though on a lot of these really ultra sonically hip bands like ELP and even Steely Dan as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did the ELP gig go to Steely Dan, and how did that work out?
Well, here like ELP is interesting because they were like the last of the really gigantic English bands before the Americans started taking over. You know what I mean? They were still popular amongst people, but the focus changed to these American bands like Kiss, Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, Boston, Peter Frampton, REO Speedwagon. You know what I mean?
Alice Cooper.
Alice Cooper. Exactly. And these. So also there was an audience change. Where that all of a sudden the people that were supporting all the English bands in the end of the 60s into the 70s, they either moved away or stopped going to shows. You know how it is when you're in high school. It's like, my brother listens to that. Like nowadays, it's like, oh, that's grandpa music, or whatever, and
yeah, but kids like it. As you can see from the shows, you see it. You see this generational thing happening, whether it's Ace Frehley fans and Kiss fans that are coming out to the shows, or it's Alice Cooper fans. It has switched a little bit to more like kids don't think their parents' music sucks as much anymore, right? Or do they?
That's on the Alice Cooper. That picture there, that's Nick Perry with the Duke shirt on. He was in the band Silvertide. Who you weren't. I don't think you were there for that. That was 2003 on Alice Cooper.
Okay.
Were you there?
2000. It depends on what. Yes, I was. Actually, you know what? They opened up. Okay. Right. Here's the story about Silvertide. Because I was reading up on you, and you were listing all these bands. Someone had asked you what your favorite live performances was, because you've seen a lot of them. And you were mentioning, Iggy Pop was up there. There's some Aerosmith in there. There was some New York Dolls. But then you said Silvertide in London was one of your most sonically pleasing gigs. And what was that? Why was that?
Here's the deal, right? With that, those kids, right? They were kids. They had a little band, and they were playing in a club, and next thing you know, they played 7 shows, and there were 7 labels bidding for them.
All over for them, yeah.
Everybody thought they were the next Aerosmith kind of thing. This is like in 2002, right? But the thing was, they were from North Philly. They were like a breakout. They had no idea about the music business whatsoever. So they would go and they would throw themselves into making music like with no fear, right? They rented a cabin in the woods, and they spent like 2 months out there writing songs without any kind of interference from anybody, right? And they come up with these songs. When it came to live performance, I used to prod them too, going like, listen, this is an opportunity, and you have to seize these opportunities. I mean, like, you got to go out and fight, to get an audience to pay attention to you. So you got to grab them by the throat and really. So by the time they hit that show that I was talking about in London, they had played easily 150 shows. We had John. You know who Johnny Purdell is?
Yeah.
Johnny Purdell was their booking agent, right?
He was Alice Cooper's booking agent for many years too.
That's true, right? Yeah. And that's how we got on Alice Cooper's tour, and how we got on Van Halen too. But they worked really hard, and they were smart too. They'd see how it works, They'd watch a Cooper show, and they would incorporate elements of that, and especially because they were kind of pure, right? They had no idea. All they knew was like, they would say, well, we read on the internet, and I was like, nothing on the internet is true, right?
Except in the trenches, and all the stories that Nite Bob is saying today are true.
Well, I'm just giving you some a little highlights there, but they could let it rip, and they still let it rip. I mean, Nick is out fronting his own band now. He has a band called Nick Perry and the Underground Thieves. Walt, the singer, has moved more into Americana, which is where he really was. They tried to make him into something that he wasn't.
I'm such an idiot. I'm
Imagine that.
I'm seeing the script that Federica so eloquently laid out for me and gave me a lot of things to go on. And I'm saying, yeah, Silvertide, let me go check out this band. And I'm like, wait a second, they did open up for us. I didn't realize it I didn't remember it until you said it. And it was 2003. So we have toured before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Alice Cooper, it's like I did Jesse Camp opening for Alice Cooper.
We've toured many times then. Yes.
You were there because I had pictures.
I was there at the Great America fiasco.
What a great night that was.
What really happened there? Did Jesse Camp throw some water on something?
Think about this for a second.
Okay.
This patron said that he spit on them, right? And decides to sue Jesse Camp, his label, Hollywood Records, Alice Cooper for having them on the show, right? The Great Adventure Amusement Park for booking said show, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a big thing, and it was like, I was like, really?
And all he was doing was singing. Because if anybody knows that Jesse Camp does generate a lot of saliva when he sings.
That is absolutely true. I'm so glad you said that. Because listen. I could do an entire podcast on Jesse Camp.
You know what? Jesse's going to come on the podcast. We've talked. We've been talking back and forth. We just got to figure out the right date. I just figured it would be nice to have you on. We're on the same. We're on the same tour. We're in the same hotel room. So it's good to have us on the same plane. Let's take a quick break right now. Nite Bob, if you're cool with it, we're going to hear from one of our sponsors. They're our microphone company that is Beyerdynamic, and
microphone.
They're great microphones. There it is. Nite Bob approved. Beyerdynamic, our sponsor. We'll be back, folks, with a little bit more of In the Trenches coming up right now. Hey. Hello, Ryan Roxie here, host of the In the Trenches podcast, and I also play guitar for Alice Cooper. I just wanted to take a second to talk about what mic you're hearing me speak through and what headphones I choose to listen to all my audio with. My go-to podcast and live performance mic is this TG V7 dynamic vocal mic. And when I'm recording acoustic stuff, I'll always mic it up with the Beyerdynamic M160 double ribbon mic. I listen to everything with the DT1770 Pro headphones unless I'm out and about. That's when the Eventho wireless headphones really make listening to music, podcasts, or any other audio app that's on my phone ultra high fidelity and latency free. Check out their official site or the links below in the description of this video to find out more about what makes Beyerdynamic a musician's choice in pro audio mics and headphones. Now, let's get back into the trenches for some more rock and roll. Enjoy the show. Enjoy the ride. Who is that clean-shaven young man hawking Beyerdynamic? I don't know.
You make a very good spokesperson.
Well, you know what? More coming. Hey, by the way, check it out.
Oh yeah. You got them in England, right?
These are CliC Eyewear. They're one of our newest sponsors as well.
Oh, really?
So it's not going to be a call commercial, but it's all about
I had a tour manager from the UK on Steely Dan who had those. And this was 7 years ago.
What was it like working with Steely Dan? I'm very curious.
Let me tell you something, right? It's like I should probably be really careful how I say this, but
don't be careful. It's in the
listen. Like a lot of musicians are very much savant, right? They can do one thing and do it really well, right? And usually they take up an instrument because they have communication issues with other human beings, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's kind of, the read. Now, these guys, on the other hand, are like fucking brainiacs, right? Every day with them was like, they were so smart, right? And so dark, right? Here's the deal, right? I met them at that same studio in 1973. They came from California to rehearse a couple of days.
That same rehearsal studio. That seems to be the epicenter of where a lot of your stuff went down.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were coming to do a thing called ABC TV Live in Concert, where they would show a live concert that was at Banana Fish Garden in Brooklyn, and then broadcast it on WABC radio in stereo.
Not quadraphonic.
Not quadraphonic. Stereo, right? So I met them there and actually worked that show, right? And then like a billion years later, a friend of mine who was working for Steely Dan says, listen, I'm going out and doing Brian Setzer, and Becker needs an engineer to record some rehearsals. He's demoing up to do a solo record. He goes, you should do it, right? So I go to SIR in New York, and as soon as I walked into the room, Becker says to me, he goes, I remember you. You were in that studio that is what is now Soho. Right. And I was like, okay. Right. So I was like, yeah, I'm telling you, these guys were fucking sharp. Right. And very dark and weird. I mean, read the lyrics. And one of the first things when I started working for him, first of all, I go, I'd love to mix this band. And Becker says to me, he goes, you don't want to do that. I go, what do you mean? He goes, like, engineers have a very short lifespan in this band. He goes, and in our discussions here, says like you and me and Donald, we're all like within a couple of years of each other age-wise, and we kind of all went to the same shows. I mean, like Donald grew up in Passaic, New Jersey. I grew up in Forest Hills. You grew up in Kearney and spent a lot of time in Greenwich Village. He goes, I have a better job for you, right? So I became what was called their tour manager, right? A road manager for the two of them, right? And basically it was if you step back and look at it, I was probably the highest paid entertainment director and baggage consultant on the planet Earth, right? Flew around in a private jet. They said, like, we don't trust front of house guys, but we trust you. So you go out there and you keep an eye on them and you come back and tell us what you think, because we value your opinion. And I'm like, that's pretty good. And he goes, and just so you know, there's two other people listening out there too. So if your story doesn't match up with theirs, we know there's an issue, right? So I'm like, okay.
Right.
So this went on for like the first couple of weeks. Then they said, you know what? We really trust you. We're giving you complete power to reach over and change anything you want while the show is going on. Oh, that annoyed some engineers. Let me tell you. I mean, it's like
power.
Yeah, right. Plus, which was kind of, I didn't do it that much, and unless there was a severe problem, because I knew with them the placement of the kick drum is like really important, because too many engineers, they want to show off their great kick drum sound, right? If you listen to Steely Dan records, the kick drum is not very prominent. It's like a jazz record, it's like a thump in the background. Right. And and it's like too many engineers would immediately go into, they'd love to show their wonderful drum sound. And they weren't into that at all,
Without risk of trying to get things echoey and stuff like that, I want to find out, what do you find more challenging to mix? A band that can't play their instruments and you're trying to make the best mix possible, or a band like Steely Dan or ELP that are such geniuses at their instruments that are so high demanding with their sort of sonic demands?
Okay, here's the band that can't play, right? Because
you worked with both. That's the thing.
Yeah,
you definitely worked with your share of both.
To be honest, I said I've worked with some bands that seem primitive but are not. I mean, it's
give me
like
an example of maybe I would say maybe the Stooges are like that. They're probably
definitely like that. You try and play drums like Scott Ashton did on the second record, on the Funhouse record. It's very unique drumming, and very much like self-taught, kind of stuff, and in a way kind of pure, there's some outside influences, but not like he was listening to Cream or something like that, right? Here's the deal, right? With a band like Steely Dan, the music is composed to fit together, right? And more untrained, so all the parts are easy. I'm telling you, you could go there and you could bring up all the faders to zero and you'd be pretty close. You know what I mean? Because the music is designed to work, to have space, right? That every instrument has space, Right. Well, meanwhile, like in say a band like the Ramones, it's all about emotion and attitude and firepower, and in the same case though, that like if you tried to play like Tommy from the Ramones on the first couple of records, very unusual style of drumming that a lot of normal drummers could not play.
I always say like a guy like Steven Adler. There's no one else that could play the drums on Appetite for Destruction like the way Steven Adler did.
I agree 100%. And it's like when they said that, when they threw him out, I go, that's the end of that band. As a
very unique drumming and special in rock and roll history, obviously. Well, let me ask you this: what does a crowd play in the part of a good show or a bad show when you're out in the front of house mixing a band? Can a crowd's energy or a crowd's vibe influence the entire mix for a band?
No,
it is what it is.
You get let me tell you something. I've mixed some really bad sounding shows in my life, right? For a variety of reasons, right?
For a variety of reasons,
right? And the worst feeling in the world is when you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, "Oh, that was so horrible. I worked really hard and I could never get it together." And there's a stream of people going by, going like, "Sounded great! Yeah, ever heard." And you're going like,
"You knew,
we're not listening." Yeah, that's Boston. That's an Aerosmith 1976 pre-production rehearsals for the Rocks tour.
How can you tell? Can you tell because of the shirt you're wearing, or can you tell with the consoles?
I recognize by the consoles. Actually, they're both British consoles. The one on my side is a Mavis, and the one in front of me is a Gelp. And back at that time, here's funny because you were talking about your headphones. When I got irritated, I would smash headphones in 1976.
So you needed a Beyerdynamic endorsement?
Well, I'm sure I smashed at least 20 of them. I would get mad and I just smashed them, and because I was out of control,
Well, let me ask you this, because the art form has obviously changed with live sound, like crazily it's changed, from the days of you and your dad making that first PA to now what you're mixing Ace Frehley off of these days. What did you have to change to transition from the old analog boards of the 70s to today's digital systems?
Nothing.
Was it nothing?
Nothing. Because here's the deal, right? It's all about balance, right? Balancing the instruments relative to each other. That's what makes a great mix to me, right? That you really have to, back in England, they used to call them balance engineers, right, rather than mixers, right? And it's like getting the instruments in the proper space and stuff. That's what it all takes, right? And that's
the first front of house, wasn't it? Was it Fleetwood Mac or someone that went from, because usually the sound engineers used to be on the side.
Dawson, who was mixing Fleetwood Mac back in the day, as being the first guy to move the console out front
to the front of the house. So it used to be called sound engineer, and you'd mix from like back where the drummer was, or some maybe on the side of the stage.
Side of the stage, people didn't care that much, really. It's like when I saw bands in the late '60s, they used whatever the PA in the house was. It wasn't until later on that bands began to care about what they sounded like, and but. The transition from analog to digital, you had to wait for the biggest problem was it took time for the technology to catch up, because everybody was in a rush, like you can listen to some of those first digital recordings, right? And they don't sound so good and when you listen to them, but it was digital, no scratches, no pops, you can't, it'll always sound this way. But that wasn't as hard, it really wasn't. And PAs got better and better. Every year the PA was better than the year before because there was, people wanted to make it better.
But overall, you're saying the technique hasn't changed, but it has to have changed a little bit as far as in the same sense that I play out of amps and now you play out of more, digital sounding stuff when we're recording. There is a transition. No, do you still feel the sound as much, or do you?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think that it comes down to it's like that's just a method of delivery, really. When you really get down to it, if the band has it, you know what I mean, and can play, with enough energy and emotion to convey that to an audience, the PA is just a transfer method. That's all. You can't make a band more. There's not, like that famous cartoon with the suck button.
Yes.
His last day on the job, he's cranking up the suck button on the band. Bands do a really good job of cranking up their own suck button. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's really it's the power of a good performance.
Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite band that you've ever mixed, or do they all sort of kind of have something special to them?
I look back, and there were shows that I did that when it's really difficult when you say, what are your 10 favorite shows you ever mixed? And like sometimes the first things come to mind were it was like REM. I mixed REM on Life's Rich Pageant, right? And they were I left the business for a couple of years, right? I got tired of it. After 5 years of it, I just said, this blows. I'm tired of it. I'm going to go play guitar. I'm going to sell some guitars, do some other stuff, right? And when I came back because Aerosmith asked me to come back in 1983. So I came back, I started mixing shows, and I went from 83, 84, 85.
Is that like sort of the Done With Mirrors era, or right around there?
Back in the saddle into Done With Mirrors, right? It was all hard rock, right? And then when Aerosmith flamed out in 86, I went to Ted Nugent, which is, Cat Scratch Fever, woohoo, and he's very professional. Great shows. He could play his ass off, man, when he wanted to, right? And then I went to REM, and REM kind of cleaned the slate for me because it was so different.
Right.
They were the songs were very different. The audience was different, right? The way they
cleansed your palate. They were
you could say that. It was it was more of an eye-opening thing, that there was a shift going on in the audience, right? All of a sudden this band was becoming extremely popular, right? With a mumbling singer, right? It's like, because I remember saying to Michael Stipe once, I go, hey, in this song, are you saying we could gather, throw up beer? And he turned to me and he said, no, but from now on, that's what I'll be mumbling, right? And they were really good people, right? And it was very different from what was going on. It changed my perspective on things, right? And on how, it was very, what I would have thought would be a small market was like, we were playing some big ass shows.
Yeah, it was a whole nother new genre of music that was rising up at that point. Wow.
But they sounded great. Their whole thing was that they would spend time working on a set list, and they'd start the first song, then you could throw the set list away. They went whatever, their desire carried them, Did
the audience have any influence on it as well? I mean, the audience must have had some sort of.
Well, not really, because one night, there was one night they played all covers, and the audience was not happy.
Right? They think they are the Replacements.
They wanted to hear Radio Free Europe. It was around the same time as the Replacements.
Yeah, that's what I loved about the Replacements. The Replacements they were kind of like the Norm Macdonald of rock bands. They would do whatever you'd think they would do. They would probably do the opposite. If it annoyed you, they'd even do it more.
So my first day with REM, they would encore with Toys in the Attic, right? And I was like, wow, this is really irritating. Yeah.
REM would encore Toys in the Attic, Aerosmith.
Yeah, we played Toys in the Attic, right? And they're going, hey, we're playing a song from that band you just finished working with. And I said, yeah, and you're playing it wrong, right? And they were like, what do you mean? And it was like,
why in the attic? You were mumbling.
Yeah, listen, I can't And look, they in their, props to them. At one point they said, you know what, we said everything we're going to say. That's it. Bang, we're done as a band.
Yeah. And they haven't done that big reunion tour or anything like that.
I don't think they ever would either. They're not that kind of people. It was a different motivation.
Wow. Shout out respect to REM and ABBA. Maybe it's just those lettered band names. That's what it is. Nite Bob, I need to get some animation in here, and obviously because we usually have. I've been a little out of practice, folks. We didn't do our back to get forward animation, and guess what? This whole show has been a little bit back to get forward, but now we have a segment that you're going to love. This animation, Nite Bob. It's a section we like to call the one that got away. So Vic, maybe we can run it, and then I'll explain what it is tonight.
Okay, cool.
After this. And that would be the bassist of REM that's in that little segment right there. But the one that got away is about, and it's cool that we're having you on as a sound technician, plus being a guitar player, that there is a thread in that. And hey, look, we got matching glasses on, but do yours do that? Huh?
No, they don't.
No, I'll get you a pair that does then. How about that? So here's the thing. Mm-hmm. The one that got away is about a piece of gear, whether it's an instrument or perhaps in your field, it's some sort of something that helped you with your craft that was either lost, stolen, or you had to sell at one point that you wish you had back. Maybe it's a compressor, maybe it's a microphone, maybe it is a guitar. But what is the one that got away for you?
Usually I use that term, the one that got away, to women that sort of like I made some kind of tragic mistake with,
Oh boy, are we going to open that can of worms? Is that Pandora's box going down?
Let's keep it gear-centric today.
Gear-centric.
I would say it's like I have very little attachment to electronic gear in any way, shape, or form, right? I could easily say that I made a big mistake selling any number of guitars, right? That you at one point you look back and you say, like, I should have never sold that guitar.
Wow.
Not that one.
That's a nice. Wait, is that an Explorer bass?
I never owned it for one.
Okay.
Right? But there were several guitars that I could say like that. Larry Friedman, who had We Buy Guitars, right? He says there's two reasons why a musician sells a guitar. And I go, and what are they, Larry? And he would go, number one, they needed the money, right? And I go, and what's number two? They needed the money, right? So words to live by. It's a thing. It's I find that people get, wildly attached to items, right? And it's kind of like you start feeling like you should only own what you can carry with you at any one time. Okay. This is coming from a guy who owns way too much stuff.
Where do you keep it all? You're Mr. New York. I mean, it costs you more to keep it in New York than it does actually to have it.
That's why it's outside in New York.
Okay, good.
Right? I have a back cave that has all this stuff that I bought that I know if I sold it, I would never be able to replace it.
You don't really have one that got away because you have all the good stuff still.
I have a lot of good stuff now. And at one point you go like, yeah, I really shouldn't have sold that guitar. But on the other hand, I have these over here and they're really good, or I have this amp or that amp.
Then do you have a special guitar that you're happy that you still have and it didn't?
I have like an Earl Line Automatic, which is a custom guitar built in Texas that used to belong to James Honeyman Scott from the Pretenders.
Wow, that's a nice one.
That's a special instrument. I also own a Firebird that I bought for $60. It's a '63 Firebird. And when I was working
$60, where'd you buy that at? Are you going to the same pawn shops Ace is? What's going on?
No, listen, I know where to go. I bought it from an accordion store in Jersey City. I went in back then. any music store you could buy guitar strings in. And it happened to be an accordion store. And I went in to buy some guitar strings. I looked on the wall and there's this Firebird. And I go, that's awful, horrible looking instrument. He goes, I hate it. And I go, what do you want for it? He goes, make me an offer. And I said, $60. And he handed it to me. He says, get it out of my store. Right. And I was like, okay. And James Williamson played that guitar on New Year's Eve for a song.
Who did?
James Williamson from the Stooges, and that Stooges show I did with Blue Oyster Cult and Kiss, and and Teenage Lust. Right, he played, and there's video of him playing it.
That was a big show, man. That was a groundbreaking show. So that's cool.
That's kind of, those instruments. There's sort of an emotional attachment to those,
but not so much the PA equipment, not so much because
because it gets better all the time. I mean, it's.
But Steve, people still talk about the old compressors, though, man. You got to have the tube compression and all that kind of stuff.
Listen, a very famous engineer said to me once, he says, the least amount of crap in between the music and the audience is the best thing.
That's the way I feel about my guitar signal,
He goes like, don't fuck with it. Just make, your job is to get that music that musician is playing to those people. Who are you to make, critical decisions, so don't start over compressing and crushing the life out of it, and it's like, it really changed my idea of how mixes should be. And then I was talking to Dave Natal. Do you know Dave Natal? He mixes the Rolling Stones, right?
Okay.
He doesn't use any compression anywhere. He goes, I go, you really? No compression? He goes, this is my mic compressor. I ride his fader. And this guy's doing stadiums, right?
Wow. But at this point, Mick's probably got his mic control down to the 2.2 like such a
I don't know about that, but I don't know.
I guess not, too. All right, I will say, legendary singers and mic control. It does not always go hand in hand.
Listen, let me tell you, Paul Rodgers, the best mic control of any singer I've ever worked with.
Okay. Well,
Paul Rodgers, right? But gear is gear. It's a hammer. You can have a hammer made out of plutonium. You can have a hammer that you buy in Home Depot. Both will do the job of driving a nail.
Okay.
Right?
I like that as life advice.
I'm telling you. It's sort of like
it's metaphorically great.
You can drive a Ferrari. You can drive a Ferrari, or you can drive a smart car. They will both get you from point A to point B. And one of them will need a mechanic named Luigi to keep it running.
Nite Bob, are you plutonium or are you Home Depot? Are you?
I try and think that'd be.
Are you a Ferrari or are you a smart car?
No, here's what it is. I think I'm a smart car, but I like to charge plutonium money.
There you go.
Right, because it's like, this is the truth. I really think that like there's plenty. It used to be there weren't that many engineers, right? And just in the past 4 weeks, I've been able to listen to both Brad Maddox and Mix like a bunch of shows, right? And I sat through the show that he did. Sat through is an important thing, right? That I stayed for an entire show that he mixed of R40, the Rush Farewell Tour, which was, if you asked me what was some of the most amazing shows I've ever heard, I would put that up in the top 10.
Really?
Yeah, it was really, really wonderful show. Totally mixed great. And like there's a lot of good engineers out there.
I was gonna say, who is there? I mean, I kind of look at you as legendary status. I look at you as like the way I look at my Cheap Trick in that sense of bands, the bands I love. Who is this Eddie Van Halen amongst soundmen? Who is that Randy Rhoads, that Eddie Van Halen, that Brian May of sound technicians?
Right then, you've spoken of like 4 or 5 people, right? You could, like I heard Brad Maddox do a spectacular show, right? I heard Mark Dottle mix Steely Dan and have a spectacular show. Robert Scofield on the last Tom Petty tour. This is the greatest compliment I could give, right? After the first song, right? Completely all my, critical bits shut off and just said, this is great. Don't overthink it. Just sit and enjoy the music, right? And then came this drum fill that was breathtaking. And this is at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, right? And when you can because it's hard, when you mix bands, it's hard to shut it off sometimes, right? You're sitting there going, the hi-hat's too loud, the kick drum, and it kind of ruins the, music for you, because it's hard to turn off that critical thing. But there are shows, man, that all those things in your head just shut off and go like, just sit back and enjoy it and be a punter for a change. Be a 16-year-old listening to a great rock show and get that
into it in the first place. Yeah. Are you in demand? Hold on. Is that your?
No, that's the Royal Albert Hall, and that's my staff, right? From Capitol Audio. Right. They're all like 20 years younger than me, and they are really good at what they do. It's just like Ron, who is the system engineer on Alice Cooper, is also really good at what he does.
There you go. Throwing out some love to the Alice Cooper Ace Frehley tour.
I gotta say that. You know what? Since we're there, I just say that, like, look, after a 2-year layoff, right, to come out and to be in a situation where everybody is so nice, so talented, and so helpful, right, is really kind of refreshing. You know what I mean? So I'm sure everybody's happy to be here. But it's like, it's like talented people, another thing I was told when I was really young was just like work with talented people, right? And there's like everybody who works in this organization is very talented at what they do, and they carry their weight and they work really hard. Your production assistant, Amber, Judy, all they work really hard. They're also in the show. So you got to shout out.
That's the thing with the Alice Cooper band. Yeah, you not only do what you're hired to do, you're going to wear a couple other hats as well, and you're going to most probably be in the show. But yeah, man, I love the fact that you're spreading the love around with the Alice Cooper camp and the Ace Frehley camp. Is there a gig? Like, I mean, obviously we've done a lot of shows together so far. Is there a venue where sound guys, sound engineers go, all right, this one's going to be a tough one?
Yeah. The one we were in last night or the night before,
Yeah. But is there like one of those those Hollywood Bowl type of rooms where you go, oh God, this one's
problem with the Hollywood Bowl is there's a guy breathing down your neck going 98 dB or you go to jail, right? I was like, I ain't going to jail for that. I'll turn the fucking PA off. I did that in Sweden, where the government, New York Dolls, right? New York Dolls are playing. What's that big Swedish fest?
You're playing Sweden Rock.
Sweden Rocks, right? I had government officials with like graphs and meters and printouts and everything, right, saying I had to keep it at 95 dB, which is a struggle, right, with the New York Dolls, right? And at one point, I turned off the PA. He goes, we could take you to jail. And I go, oh, jail? I turned the PA off. The band's still playing, right? And it was, I go, that's just the band. And they go, are you saying we should arrest the band? I go, yeah, watch this, right? The show ended. The song ended and the audience went nuts and it went off the chart. And I said, arrest all your countrymen because they're louder than the band and the PA.
What's the loudest you've ever mixed? What's the loudest you've ever mixed a show, Nite Bob?
Oh, I've mixed some really loud shows.
That is kind of. Come on, what do you think?
Off the top of my head, Kiss in London.
Kiss in London, you mixed.
That's very funny. Yeah.
And when you think about it, like, what is a jet? And because I don't really know the relative things.
Okay. Of let me tell. We'll put it to you this way, right? So Paul Stanley comes to me before sound check, and he goes like, I want you to make this show the loudest show ever that was in this arena, right? And I'm like, I can do that, right? I can do that, right? So I go out, I do this show. It was loud, man. It was scary loud. And it was like 1988, and it was like I was like. The next day, Stanley pulls me aside. He goes, I told you to make this show really loud, and you did that. I'm like, okay. And he goes, but it's really hard for me to perform looking at a front row that looks like they're on a rocket sled with like this, their hair is blown back and all this, so you gotta turn it back, But that was the thing in the 70s. That was the thing, especially. I mean, I've done some loud shows. I'm not into it as much. The PAs are better, right? You can, and it's
You're
also
getting what you need out of the PA.
Well, your motivation changes. You want coverage. You want people to enjoy music. You don't want to bludgeon them to death. And in some cases, when you get into an older audience, right, you can tire them out really fast by hammering them with low end, right? They get physically tired, and you can watch it. You can watch it happen because they're like, band comes out like, yay! 5 songs in, they're like, yay! Right? 8 songs in, somebody's passed out.
Well, yeah. 18-ounce beer and a hot dog and like 5 songs with a bunch of low end. That is going to tire everybody out.
That's the Steely Dan thing, because they sit for an hour and they drink, right? Steely Dan audience, because Becker says, he goes, what do you think of the audience? I go, they're a bunch of drunks. And he goes, really? What do you mean? I go, I come into a venue and they go, we're happy you're back. I go, why? Because we sold out the place? They go, no, it was the biggest bar of the season.
Exactly.
Right?
About the most amount of
because they're making bank on selling alcohol, right?
Funny.
And it was because I say, you watch, right? Goes, they sit there and they drink all throughout the show, and then when you play My Old School, they get up and they want to dance, right? And what they do is that first they struggle to get up, and then they wobble around, and
Well, I forgot that we're doing a late night show in Europe for our European audience on the live stream. So I appreciate you guys the entire time hanging out in the chat with all these amazing comments that have been coming up the whole time that we've had Nite Bob as our guest.
I'm sorry, I can't, I really haven't been paying attention to those comments.
Well, no, there's a lot of them been coming up right there. The thing is, we do have some special guests that have been following us on the Ace and Alice tour. And we'd like to do, we would like to put up a little bit of the Fan of the Week section right now, because we do have some fans that came out, and we were trying to figure out who could we pick out that has been following the tour, has been coming to enough shows, because I know that Officer Burkholder has been out on the whole tour. But we do have a special Fan of the Week. Vic, you want to run it real quick? And it's not just Fan of the Week, it's Fans of the Week. You might have been seeing them in the venues, Nite Bob. This is Heather Ruin and Jen Sumo. They've been following the tour. They've gone to a bunch of shows on this tour. So you are our Fans of the Week. Oh, wow. We even have the graphics for it. And thank you very much for being part of that In the Trenches family and being part of it. Again, if this is your first time listening to us on the podcast and you're listening to us on audio, thank you very much. But make your way on over to Ryan Roxie Official and hit the subscribe button that is right there in the corner if you can, and subscribe for more shows like this. Our guest this week has been Nite Bob, legendary sound technician and currently front of house technician for Ace Frehley and on the Alice Cooper Ace Frehley tour. When you're not spending time blowing people's ears off, but you don't do that anymore, because like you said, you're making people enjoy music. When you're not spending time giving that nice sonic experience, you're saving cats, right?
Okay.
I just wanted to quickly go before we have to close the show down. I want people to talk about your cat love.
At one point I realized the power of the internet, right, to help animal rescue, right? It's not really saving cats. It's like I think that I have cats. I've always had cats. I've had dogs. I've had all, but animal rescue became a thing, right? And I found that I was able to raise money for animal rescues on Facebook, right? Then the Facebook app changed, and it was hard to do that. It's like evil Facebook, no saving cats and dogs. Okay, like okay. So I started doing these T-shirts, right? And we'd sell these Nite Bob T-shirts that said delivering the decibels, right? And we take the money we made from that, and we give them to animal rescue organizations who could always use an extra buck here and there.
That's cool.
So what I say that it's like, if you want to, I go for the price of an expensive Starbucks coffee or a slice of pizza or something like that. Forget about that coffee that time and send $5 to a local animal rescue that helps.
Do you have anyone in particular that you support?
I do, but I would say that it's like think global, act local. Find some organization, and they work really hard to rehome animals, right? And they're all self-funded. You know what I mean? It's not like they're getting big chunks of money from like Purina or something like that. They just want to help. This kind of help cats who need to be feral cats or cats that need to be rehomed, because they go into shelters, and if they don't get adopted out really fast, they get euthanized, right? And I think that's a terrible thing. It's like they use this phrase: adopt, don't shop. Don't go buy some cat from a pet store, rescue a cat, or to.
What do you do with your cats when you're on the road? You're on the road so much time.
Yeah, listen. Do you have a cat?
Yeah, no, actually, I don't have a cat. I
go away for like when I come back, my cat's going to go, "Who are you?" I'm serious. We'll go like, "Who are you?" It's like. Like your partner's been opening the cans. If we had opposable thumbs, we wouldn't need you at all. So.
Vic just put up a shirt. Now, does that have something to do with the cat?
I was doing those shirts. It's like everything in my life. It started as a joke, right? and which is like that whole legendary thing is another thing that is a joke, right? Why is legendary? Because I made some.
Because you're part of the legacy. You're the guy that makes these bands. That you enable people to hear these bands. So I think.
Well, to a point. See, here's the thing. A lot of times it was like I was an innocent bystander. I wrote a book about my arc through audio, right? And I called it Innocent Bystander because I tended to kind of just look into these things. I did that band because nobody else wanted to. Right. When I went from Emerson Lake and Palmer to the New York Dolls, right, my friends in Emerson Lake and Palmer said, "We cannot believe your career has plummeted from going from like an arena act with history like Emerson Lake and Palmer to this band. It's like they're horrible, right? Well, who's talking about Emerson Lake and Palmer now, right?
And who's still touring right now?
Who's influential now? But the funny thing to that statement was I said, yeah, but I don't have to lift anything anymore, stack PA. And they went, what do you mean? I go, I fly with the band. I travel with the band, and I fly, we fly everywhere. And all I do is mix the PA. And then the engineer pulls me aside, the ELP engineer pulls me aside and says, once you leave the working class, never go back. Words to live by, right? But the cat thing, it was almost embarrassing because it was like my friend Bryn Aarons, who you may know, right? He came up with that when we were taking the Showco logo and made it into a Nite Bob logo, and then he has we decided to print some shirts up, right? And to me, I find it embarrassing. I'd never wear one, right? And And I was like, I don't even feel good taking money for this. So I figured I would just do it, in the ads that we did for him, it said like, my part of the proceeds go to animal rescue. Right.
There you go.
And now they're a limited edition thing. There's only about 200 made. We're going to do another one, I think, really soon.
Well, there you go. And that's how we'll close things out for people to find out more information about you. I'm not sure if Vic has any sort of, contacts for you, but if someone was interested in going one of those,
it'll be on Facebook. You'll know. I mean, like probably Facebook if and when we do.
Is that the best way to do it?
Yeah, pretty much. It's going to be the last times. Yeah, you can go to nitebob.com too, which is that's a place marker. That's basically so you can get in touch if you want to hire me to make your band sound loud.
But if you're interested in the shirts or anything like that, or having more contact questions about sound, or just that kind of stuff, getting one of these. I may
even answer them. It's like if you have a good question, if you don't ask me how to keep the hi-hat out of the snare drum. That I won't answer.
But you're good with it. You're good with equipment, and honestly,
I like that. Listen. I've had a long career, right? And it's like I've had a really good time, and I like to help people out. That's why at one point I started doing young bands and trying to help them to achieve what they're trying to achieve. Let me tell you, this is like trying to. Not them. They have a different focus, but I mean like. Let me tell you,
right on, Vic.
I worked with these triplets who were signed to Warner Brothers, right? And before they went to make their record, they said, "Do you have any advice?" And I said, "Don't let them make you into something you're not." Well, they were really obstinate, and they wound up getting dropped, right?
Ouch.
Because the producer said, "I can't work with them," because he wanted to make them into something that they weren't. They sounded like Nirvana with great slick singing. Right now, all of them found the music business the three triplets found the music business incredibly distasteful, and none of the three are involved in music right now.
And here you are 50 years later, Nite Bob, mixing sound as both of us go on to our tour buses. I'll see you in Topeka, Kansas, I believe. That's where we're headed, folks, to the Elvis.
Enjoyable talking with you.
To the Evel Knievel Museum. Maybe we'll meet at the Evel Knievel Museum that's right next door to the venue tomorrow. But folks, you have been hanging in the trenches with Nite Bob. I have not once in the entire interview said Mick Bob, which is amazing for me because you probably know Mick Bob as well, right?
Oh yeah, Mick Bob, right? Who works for Guns N' Roses?
Exactly. So the whole time I was like going, "Don't make me
Bob thing." Have you ever seen Video Scrapbook?
No. Okay, no. Tell me about it.
It only exists on video cassette. It's something they put out during Done with Mirrors to try and make some money. But there's some interesting. The first time we had video cameras. Right?
Oh, so there's like sort of like behind the scenes.
Well, what it was is that Tom Hamilton says something to me, and then he didn't want to give out my last name. Right, because secrecy was everything in the 80s, right? So he goes, "That's Nite Bob, Mick Bob," right? and it's like to this day, Sebastian Bach. That's me. That's the 70s photos if I ever saw one.
So to this day, Sebastian Bach does what?
He calls me Mick Bob. Mick Bob. No, it's like
Sebastian calls a lot of things. There you go.
I know, there you go.
Did you mix Skid Row? Did you do Skid Row before?
No.
Never. Well, I'm happy to say
the one that got away.
The one that got away, perhaps. No.
Well, there you go.
So hey, Mick Bob. I did it. I said I wasn't going to do it. I did.
No drugs. Nothing but water was done during this show. Nothing.
That's because it's not late for us, but all those in Europe.
I'm just waking up. We should do this again in an hour after I have a cup of coffee.
Maybe I'll
tell you the real deal about Steven Tyler.
Oh boy, maybe we'll have to have you on for part 2 again. But Nite Bob, I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much. Everybody go check out Nite Bob's Facebook if you'd like to, and support a local cat. Think globally.
Animal rescue. It doesn't have to be a cat. Any kind of animal rescue. It's important.
Think globally, act locally. I love it.
$5 helps. Every buck helps.
And there you go. And next week, our guest is a mystery guest. We will be announcing that in just a couple days. But you've been watching In the Trenches with Nite Bob. I am your host, Ryan Roxie. Thank you very much, Vic. Thank you, Federica. Everybody out there, thanks for hanging in the chat. Until next time, enjoy the ride. See you guys.
Right on.
In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.